The wind howled across the Mojave, like an old man telling stories no one believed anymore. He stepped out of the rusted pickup truck with a slow, deliberate motion. Boots pressing into cracked earth, the sun dying behind him in a blaze of orange. His silhouette cut a quiet figure against the horizon. Dust clung to his coat like old sins. The hat was pulled low, just enough to hide the years etched into his face, but not the weight behind his eyes. The small desert town of Lorca Ridge hadn't seen Clint Dalton in 17 years. Not since the fire. Not since the night 3 men came for blood and left ashes instead. Most folks assumed he was dead, buried somewhere out past the oil flats, or faded into myth like tumbleweeds and ghost stories. But legends don't die. They just get quieter. He hadn't come back for revenge. That was a young man's game. He came back because someone sent him a letter. No return address, just 3 words written in black ink. He's coming back. Now, standing at the edge of town, he lit a match. The flame trembled slightly before catching, reflecting in his steel-gray eyes. He didn't flinch. He never did. Behind him, the truck door creaked shut on its own. In the fading sun, the shadow of a rifle case leaned gently in the truck bed, waiting like an old friend. The war was over long ago. But some ghosts don't know when to stay buried. Lorca Ridge had changed, but not enough to forget. The diner was still there, the kind where the smell of burnt coffee and old regret hung in the air like wallpaper. The same neon sign flickered over the windows, Ruby's Diner, missing the R since '98. Inside, the booths were cracked, the jukebox was silent, and the only sound was the soft clink of cutlery and low murmurs that died the second Clint Dalton stepped through the door. People didn't look up right away, but when they did, time paused like it owed him something. He walked with the same unhurried confidence he had 17 years ago. Not a swagger. Swagger was for men pretending to be dangerous. Clint didn't need to pretend. He had scars that didn't show, and stories he never told. His coat was dusty, his boots worn, and his face carved with lines that only loss could draw. And as he slid into the back booth, the one that used to belong to him, the room started breathing again. Ruby herself came out from the kitchen, older but still sharp as a switchblade. Her eyes narrowed the second she saw him. "Clint Dalton," she said, not a greeting, more like a test. He didn't smile. "You still make the eggs runny." "I make 'em like I damn well please," she snapped. But he noticed the way her hands trembled just slightly when she poured his coffee. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy, like a memory trying to crawl out of a grave. He slid the letter across the table toward her. She stared at it for a long moment before picking it up with 2 fingers, as if it might explode. The handwriting was familiar to her too. That scared her more than anything. "Who gave this to you?" she asked, her voice low. "It was taped to my door 3 nights ago. I live 300 miles from here," he said. "Nobody's supposed to know that." Ruby sat down without asking. That meant something. "Then it's true. He's out." Clint nodded once, slowly. "He's not just out. He's coming back." The he they were talking about wasn't just any man. He was the reason Clint disappeared all those years ago. The man who burned Clint's home to the ground. The man who left something worse than death behind. A silence in Clint's life that never went away. The law never caught him. No one knew where he went. Until now, Ruby looked away, out the window, toward the hills that surrounded Lorca Ridge. "You shouldn't have come back. "I didn't come for me," Clint said, his voice quiet, steady. "I came because someone else will die if I don't." Ruby knew better than to argue. In all the years she'd known Clint Dalton, there was one thing he never did. He never came back for no reason. And if he was here now, something very bad was on its way. The town had buried it, or at least pretended to. They talked about the fire like it was just an accident, a freak lightning strike during the driest summer Lorca Ridge ever saw. But everyone who'd been there that night knew better. No one dared say it out loud, but it lingered in the cracks of this place, in the blackened soil beneath the rebuilt houses and behind the tight-lipped glances of the locals. The truth had fangs, and Clint Dalton had been the only one willing to face them. That night was scorched into him, the smell of gasoline, the distant thump of booted feet against dry gravel, the sound of his name being called, not with love, but with hatred. He could still hear her scream. Her name had become something he only said in silence now, his wife, the only thing he ever truly believed in, until the night Mason Vell came for him. Mason wasn't just a rival or a criminal. He was something worse, a man who thought he owned the world. Charismatic, brutal, untouchable. He and Clint had once worn the same badge, same academy, same squad car, same war stories. But while Clint walked away from the dirt when it got too deep, Mason embraced it, became it. They were supposed to go down together, but the law had a strange way of favoring monsters who smiled the right way. Mason burned Clint's house down with Emily inside. No trial, no justice, just flames. And Clint? He vanished into the desert. Now, 17 years later, Mason Vell was back. And someone had warned him. That letter hadn't just been a message. It was a summons, a call to arms. And if Clint knew one thing about ghosts like Mason, it was this: they don't rise from the grave without dragging someone back in with them. That night, Clint sat alone on the hill that overlooked the remnants of his old home. Nothing remained but the frame of a collapsed barn and a swing set rusted half into the earth. He hadn't been here since the night he pulled Emily's wedding ring from the ashes. He still wore it on a leather cord around his neck. The moonlight cut through the clouds like a blade, and the desert wind whispered through the grass. He lit a cigarette, though he didn't smoke anymore. It was just something to do with his hands, a small ritual for the dead. He spoke her name out loud for the first time in years. Emily. And for a moment, he let the silence answer back. Not with words, just with the sound of memory. Then he heard a twig snap behind him. Clint didn't flinch. He simply turned his head just enough to speak. "I know you're there," a young voice replied from the darkness, shaky, barely brave. "They told me you'd come." He turned slowly to face the boy. Couldn't have been more than 16. Brown hair, storm in his eyes. There was something familiar in the way he stood, defiant but afraid. And then Clint saw it, the chain around his neck. Emily's locket. The boy stepped closer, holding something in his trembling hand. The second letter. And this one had 4 words. "He's coming for me." He didn't ask the boy his name right away. Names carried weight, and Clint knew too well what it meant to carry someone else's name, especially when it belonged to someone you couldn't save. Instead, he watched the kid in silence. The boy stood stiff, arms crossed over his chest like he was trying to keep something from breaking loose inside. Finally, the boy spoke again. "My mom told me about you. She said, if anything ever happened, I should find you." Clint's eyes narrowed slightly. "Your mother's name?" The boy hesitated, as if saying it might change something permanent. "Her name was Emily. The desert went quiet. The wind died. And for the first time in nearly 2 decades, Clint Dalton felt the earth shift beneath him. His voice, when it came, was dry and cracking. "That's not possible." "She didn't die in that fire," the boy said quickly. "She told me. She made it out, barely. But she went into hiding. She said it was the only way to keep me safe." Clint staggered back a half step, his throat tightening, as old truths collapsed like dominoes. Emily had lived, and for 17 years she'd let him believe she hadn't. Why? She said if Mason knew she was alive, or that she was pregnant, he'd hunt us both. So she left everything, you, this place, all of it. Clint didn't answer. He couldn't. There was too much smoke in his lungs again, too many ashes in his throat. "She died 2 weeks ago," the boy continued. "Cancer. But before she went, she gave me that letter. Told me he was coming back. Said you'd know what to do." Clint sat down hard on an old tree stump, elbows on his knees, head bowed. He felt older than he ever had. Not in his body, in his soul. For 17 years he carried the grief of losing her. And now he was being asked to carry something heavier. A son. He looked up at the boy, really seeing him now. The shape of his jaw, the steel in his eyes. The same quiet defiance that Emily had when she got mad enough to challenge the world. Clint reached into the inside of his coat and pulled out a small, weathered revolver. Not just any gun. This one had been his backup sidearm, engraved with the initials CD, and hadn't seen daylight since the night of the fire. He held it out toward the boy. The kid stared at it like it might bite. "I don't know how to use that." "You will," Clint said. "But not yet." "Why are you giving it to me?" Clint looked at him with a heaviness that could only come from a man who'd buried too many things he loved. "Because he's not just coming for you anymore," Clint said, standing. "He's coming for both of us." The boy took the gun with shaky hands, and for the first time Clint laid a hand on his shoulder. A father's hand. A protector's grip. Not soft, but sure. "You got a name?" Clint asked quietly. The boy nodded. "Matthew," he said. Clint's lips moved with the name like it was a prayer, or a second chance. "All right then, Matthew. We don't run. We prepare." He turned his gaze to the town below, quiet now, asleep under a blanket of starlight, and then to the desert highway beyond it, where shadows were already beginning to move. Clint Dalton wasn't just defending a town anymore. He was protecting his blood. And when Mason Vell rolled back into Lorca Ridge, he wouldn't find the same man he left for dead. The sun never quite rose over Lorca Ridge that day. Instead, the sky hung low and gray, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Clint Dalton stood at the edge of the main street, his long coat fluttering in the dry wind, boots planted like stone. The town behind him was silent. Windows shuttered, doors bolted. Even the dogs seemed to know something was coming. And right beside him stood Matthew, young, defiant, scared but refusing to show it. The revolver Clint gave him sat holstered at his hip, still too big for him, but he carried it like it belonged there. Down the road, a single black car came into view, not speeding, not rushing. It crawled like a shadow with wheels. Mason Vell had always made an entrance. The car stopped just short of the diner, the same one where Clint had once sworn he'd never come back. The driver's door opened, and out stepped the devil in designer boots. Mason hadn't aged like Clint had. No silver in his hair, no bend in his spine. Time had treated him like it owed him favors. But Clint could see it in his eyes, The rot underneath, the sickness of power, the arrogance of a man who thought karma was a myth. "Clint," Mason called out, arms spread like they were old friends. "Didn't think you had the guts to show your face again." Clint didn't move. "You were always wrong about me." Mason laughed. That same sharp, arrogant bark that had echoed through Clint's nightmares for years. "Still got that boy with you. Heard he's yours. Hell of a twist. Emily kept secrets well." The mention of her name was a slap. Matthew's hand twitched near his gun, but Clint reached out and stopped him with just a look. "This ends with me," Clint said quietly. "You leave the boy out of it." Mason tilted his head. "And what if I don't?" That's when Clint drew. Not fast, but steady. Like a man who knew what came next. Mason was quick, too. He always had been. But he underestimated the kind of rage that ages into patience. Mason's shot went wide. Clint's did not. The first bullet hit Mason in the shoulder. The second took out his knee. He went down hard, screaming, clutching dirt with bloody fingers. Clint walked up slowly, revolver still aimed, his boots heavy on the ground. He looked down at the man who had stolen everything from him, who burned his home, took his wife, lied about her death, hunted his son. "I used to think about killing you every day," Clint said, "but that would have been too easy." Mason spat blood and hatred. "Do it, old man." Clint paused, then slowly lowered the gun. "No," he said. "I want you to live with this." He turned away, but Matthew stepped forward, gun in hand, shaking. "This is for my mother," he whispered. Clint moved to stop him, but it was too late. One shot, straight through Mason's heart. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was something heavier, the final note of a song written in ashes. Clint stood over Matthew, who was now breathing hard, tears sliding silently down his cheeks. "You didn't have to do that," Clint said softly. "I know," the boy answered, voice tight. "But I needed to." Clint looked at him for a long time, not with judgment, not with pride, but with understanding, the kind only fathers give when they see their child carry a burden too early. Later, the sheriff would come. Questions would be asked. But in Lorca Ridge the law bent for justice, and everyone knew Mason Vell had a debt long overdue. As the sun finally broke through the clouds, Clint and Matthew stood side by side, father and son. Not with blood spilled in vain, but with a legacy reclaimed from the fire.